super humble and really awesomely excited to join us from her workspace and ready to share with you a little bit of her thoughts on the intersection between creativity and nature. Valerie, so good to see you.
Hi, so good to see you too. Thank you, Ben, so much for that introduction, and thank you for asking me to be here today with you all. I can't tell you how much it means to me to be able to have this platform and tell you all a little bit about myself and my work and sort of the journey that has brought me here today. So I really feel fortunate to be in Austin. The way that the Austin community supports the creative arts, I really truly feel like it's unmatched. I felt that from the beginning, and fostering these types of relationships just kind of fuel me forward. So again, thank you to everyone for being here today and for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. So like Ben said, my name is Valerie Wolf. I'm born and raised in Texas, and I've been living in Austin for the last 8 years. And I started my business about 6 years ago. So when I sat down to think about what it was that I wanted to talk about today on the topic of nature, I honestly got a little bit overwhelmed, just because nature arguably is something that that each and every one of us has a very unique and personal relationship to, and we experience it in different ways, shapes, and forms every single day. And so I kind of had all these ideas of places I could take this talk, and I decided to just kind of bring it back to what I know best, and that is me and my journey and my relationship with nature, and using plants and natural materials and flowers as an artistic medium. So it was a really good exercise, though, to sit down and kind of think about the foundation of my life and my experience with nature, and how that's gotten me to grow my business to where it is today. And it took me back to my childhood, actually. So I'm gonna take a little trip down memory lane real quick. And there's two sort of really pivotal moments that stand out to me that I can recall as creating that foundation and love and appreciation of nature. And one of which is my time spent at the San Antonio Botanical Gardens when I was a kid. I have so many memories of time spent there. My mom was actually, she ran a program there, sort of like an after-school program for mostly inner city kids, actually. And the students would come and tour the property and do the whole nature walk on the grounds. And then it sort of ended in like a classroom setting where each and every student would build a terrarium. And for those of you that don't know, a terrarium is sort of like its own little ecosystem. It's usually sort of created in like a glass container of sorts, and you're simulating nature within it. You layer in, your rocks and your soil and your topsoil, and then you pick different botanical plant varieties and you bury them in the soil, and they all support each other. And it creates this own little environment where everything is kind of leaning on the next thing and relying on it to survive and to live and to grow and blossom and thrive. And I have so many memories of helping my mom sort of like prep her materials, sitting out on my back porch. She ran the program for a number of years. And so I have a lot of experience and a lot of really fond memories of being surrounded by this like incredible property that is the Botanical Gardens in San Antonio. And then a number of years later, I was actually tasked with a project, a school project. I sort of discovered some gems here from my history. I went to a private school, and one of my science projects was to research native Texas wildflowers. And I went back to where I know what I knew best, which was the botanical gardens, and my dad took me over there and we photographed flowers, and I had to research their different, their scientific names and all that kind of stuff. And so this is 20 years ago. Little like 13-year-old Valerie, and then I had to photograph all these different types of flowers, and it really kind of deeply seeded a love for flowers. And when I was flipping through this book, you know, I knew that I had kept it. It meant so much to me that I've kept it for 20 years. And I haven't revisited it in a really long time, but like even just this page, there is foxglove on this side. I know you can't read the text, but there's foxglove and there's poppies. And to this day, those two flower varieties are my very favorite. And little did I know, I discovered them 20 years ago and researched them. And that was a really exciting exercise, actually, to sit down and kind of look at that journey and where that has kind of blossomed today. So another memory from my past that was truly transformative was around the same time, actually, I went on a cross-country road trip with my aunt and uncle who live in California, but they had an RV, and they picked me up in Texas, and we road tripped out to California. And it was not only my first real experience to travel and see the country and see all these different types of natural landscapes, different climates, and all that kind of stuff. But it expanded my mind to really the possibilities of what nature can provide, and the healing qualities that nature can provide to the soul, really. And that has again, a deep-seated love for me in travel, and truly an experience that really kind of transformed my life moving forward. So yeah, so that was kind of like my adolescence, and I'll skip through all of the awkward teen years because no one really wants to hear about that anyway. So fast forward to post-college. I had just moved to Austin, and I was working for an interior design firm. I was I was considering even going back to school for it. I had already graduated, but I was feeling a little lost, as most young people are, and I was considering going back to school for interior design, so I was kind of dipping my toes into that pond and seeing if it was worth the investment. And it was a small firm, and so I sort of wore many hats. And one of the projects, the roles that I was tasked with, was pulling together all of the elements that go into like staging a project, like once it's all complete and it's ready to be photographed and put on display. And one of the elements within the staging was floral arrangements. And it was the first time I really got a chance to experience not only how to pull together an arrangement, how to pull together a color palette, but also to really see firsthand the transformative power that plants and flowers, fresh flowers, hold to really uplift a space and make it sort of come alive. And I was hooked completely. And so 25-year-old Valerie was very ambitious, and I quit that job and I said, I don't want to work for anybody anymore. And so I started my business. You know, I got a part-time job to sort of supplement for the time being, but I really just went all in on the floral design path. And, you know, I went to Central Market and would get the 3 for $10 flowers at the flower bar. And I would go home and I would challenge myself to see how many arrangements I could make, and really playing with movement and depth and shape and form, and challenging myself to see what I could create. And this was kind of right at the start of Instagram. So I was just feeding every single thing that I was doing out into the world, and received really amazing feedback from the beginning. I feel very fortunate to I think one reason is the fact that I'm from Texas. I've always had an amazing, and continue to live in Texas. I've always had an amazingly supportive community around me. And from day one of starting Davy Gray, I had a lot of support from people that knew and loved me and believed in me. And with every small business, you start small. And I, in the beginning, was taking on a lot of, like birthday arrangements, anniversary arrangements, and that sort of thing. And while they were small and I knew I wanted to grow and do bigger things, those first moments and being given the opportunity to participate in people's lives and these really beautiful, special moments in people's lives brought me so much joy. It was so amazing to be a part of that and to provide this piece of art, my work, to someone to uplift their day, to enhance this moment in their life, to brighten their space. Whatever the reason was, I was so humbled to be a part of the community in that way. And so in the beginning, like I said, I was putting everything out there that I possibly could, and I definitely wasn't quite getting as far as events went, I wasn't necessarily at the level that I wanted to be as far as like getting the types of budgets that I really needed to produce the caliber of work that I knew I was capable of. And so in that time, and really still today, I relied heavily on nature and what nature on any given day was currently providing that I could use to enhance my work. And what I mean by that is I would forage. I would go out, sort of like outskirts of Austin, sides of the road, big open fields, and I would, excuse me, I would take a couple of buckets in my car and my snips, and I would drive around for hours and looking for the right, little touch of golden grass or the right sort of muted green color that needed to go into a garland or something like that. And so I relied heavily on what nature was providing at that time to really sort of hone in on an aesthetic that I wanted to present, which was which was and still is today, very natural and very kind of wild and unkempt. I always kind of say that my work, it almost kind of looks like you went out into a field of wildflowers and you just sort of ran your hand through the field and gathered up some flowers in your hands, and what comes out of that is just exactly what nature intended it to be. Now, it definitely takes some skill, and I'm not trying to diminish the amount of, time and effort that it does take to actually create a look like that. But there's a relaxation to my work and to the aesthetic, and I've really kind of fostered that aesthetic, and is now arguably something that we're sort of sought after for, which is really kind of, which is really amazing. Working in events, there's one aspect of my work and the fact that I do work with a medium that is so ephemeral, and the beauty of which is arguably so fleeting. There's kind of a societal preconceived notion that flowers are only beautiful for a certain amount of time. It's when they're at their full bloom, they're fragrant and they're lovely, and they serve their purpose on a table, on a mantle, what have you. And then during the course of an event, they serve their purpose, and then they all come down and they get dismantled and composted. And so the ephemeral quality of my work has been something that I've never fully come to terms with. So what I started doing a couple of years ago, it just sort of breaks my heart to throw my product away. So much work and time and energy goes into it. And then to see it all just get dismantled has been very hard for my heart. And so a number of years ago, I started saving anything I could that I felt would dry well. And I have just dried flowers everywhere, pretty much. And I wanted to start, that was just kind of in an effort to keep the material that I kind of feel like attached to. But then I kind of started changing tunes in this way that I wanted to kind of break that preconceived notion that flowers are only beautiful in that perfect, pristine stage of bloom. And I wanted to start showing the world that flowers have beauty even in their afterlife and after death, if you will. And so a number of years ago, about 2 years ago, I actually moved into this space that I'm coming to you live from. And it's a shared collective space that I am fortunate enough to work with my two sisters. They both are also small creative business owners here in Austin. Margot Wolf Jewelry, who is a designer and amazing jewelry designer, and then Paula Wolf, who owns Sister Wolf, and she specializes in video production and beautiful storytelling of life, really. So we moved into this space, and I don't know if you can tell right now, but we have these incredible, expansive ceilings. They're 30-foot ceilings, and I'll probably never forget the moment that we walked into this space. It's still under construction, and the ceiling is really what sold us. And I knew that moment that like this up was my real estate. It was where I wanted to take my work. And so the first year that we were here for the East Austin Studio Tour, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, it was our first year here and our first time to showcase as a collective. And I wanted to use some of that dried product and sort of simulate the look of a natural landscape. And got it pulled out now. So this is my installation work. And I'll kind of walk you through. So this section right in here, this kind of rectangular block, that was the first piece that I put up so it was 2018 East Austin Studio Tour. And like I said, I wanted to sort of simulate nature. I wanted to paint a landscape in the sky. And I was incredibly inspired, have always been incredibly inspired by Highway 1 in California. If any of you have ever had the privilege of traveling on it in the springtime, you're sort of down here on the road and you look up at these kind of sloping mountainsides, and they're just blanketed with wildflowers, and they're bursting with color and life and energy. And so that was the inspiration for this original piece. And I wanted to showcase all of the different natural elements that can go into creating kind of like a beautiful landscape and a beautiful environment. But everything is dried. The whole thing is created out of naturally dried plant and floral material. And so, yeah, I honestly didn't know exactly what I was doing. I knew at that point in my career that I had a really good foundation of and knowledge of the skill and know-how and the mechanics and the engineering of how to create something like this. But honestly didn't know what the end result was going to be, or what it was going to really look or feel like, how it was going to speak to people or be received. And the response was amazing. Like it knocked me off my feet, honestly. And it was such an amazing creative challenge. It's like nothing else I've ever done. And it was really kind of born out of an effort for me to preserve my work for myself. Like I said earlier, when it comes to events, you know, like the final product of my work is, there's a very short lifespan of it. And I wanted to physically be able to experience and look at and study my work. And so here it sits today, and it's still hanging. It's definitely continued to go through its life cycle and weather and fade from what it looked like on day one, but it's still very striking and very beautiful. And so the next year, for this past 2019 East Austin Studio Tour, I kind of toyed with what I was going to do, what I wanted to showcase that year, and toyed with the idea of taking the original piece down and just starting from scratch and creating something totally new. And my sisters, actually, we've become attached to it, and they inspired me and encouraged me to keep the original piece. And I decided I wanted to take a bit more of a conceptual approach to it as an artist. And if many of you recall, in 2019, a large part of the news media was reporting on really devastating wildfires all over the world. They were happening in California, in Australia, in Brazil. And I was extremely touched and struck by all of that imagery. And I was inspired by it, and the sort of like the destruction of nature that it can cause. And so if you can kind of see, I'll kind of walk you through this. So this original piece exists right here, but right in this little V, and then out, all of this is what I sort of decided to be my contribution to East in 2019, 1 year later after the original piece went up. And the concept was that this beautiful stretch of Highway 1 has been continuing to dry out over the course of at least a year, and it caught on fire. So this orange is sort of meant to simulate the look of fire. And then all of this right in here is supposed to kind of mimic the wafting of smoke that comes off of the fire when it breaks out. And so it, some of those images, again, like you'll see the fire and the wind takes it in a totally opposite direction. And so I wanted to kind of separate the two and show that the destruction was happening here, but it's affecting the larger part of the environment that the fire is existing in. So, so this is kind of a new product that I am dabbling my toes in, and it's very fulfilling work. Again, to be able to keep a piece of what I do has been super rewarding. And so this is kind of a direction that I'm taking my business. Still very much doing events, but then COVID hit, and events are canceled, or at least postponed, for quite a while now. And so that we were set up, my business and my team were set up to have a really exciting spring wedding season this year. And it all kind of came to a halt when COVID hit. And everyone was just kind of left with like, what's next? Like, what do we do? And, as hard as that is and was, especially those first couple of weeks when everything was just feeling like chaos, it took me a couple of weeks to kind of like compose myself, but then it allowed me to really sit down and reflect on some of those core values of why I started doing what it is that I'm doing. And those moments from that amazing community of mine where they chose to invest in me, and I was so fortunate as to be able to participate in those moments, those beautiful moments of life, and spread love and joy with fresh flowers. And so I've pivoted slightly over the last couple of months, and am now offering fresh floral designs for delivery in the Austin area. And, it's not the wedding season that we were preparing for and hoping for and ramping up for, but it's been really humbling to go back to some of those core values and remind myself of why I started doing this in the first place? And it really comes down to flowers provide happiness and joy to people, and being able to spread that to the community and to a community that fosters a love for that. Truly, there hasn't been anything better than that. So that kind of brings me to the end of my talk. Just kind of a reminder that we're in a life cycle. Nature is constantly changing and constantly evolving, and as all of us are currently. And as hard as it is, and it's hard to see past the change sometimes and see the good and the light in that, we're gonna make it through, and everything's gonna come back full circle, and nature's gonna keep going, and so are we. So thank you so much for your time and your attention, and I look forward to continuing to be a part of this community. So thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. It's so hard because you can't hear the applause that's happening right now for you and your work. And
oh, I see it. Yay.
If you have a question, you can raise your hands. You can do that virtually, and I'm going to get that great team to help me to unmute and spotlight you so that you can ask a question.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Valerie. Thank you so much for sitting in with us and sharing your story. And it's just a beautiful connection to your nature, and just how it continues to grow.
Thank you.
I kind of was like, along with your journey, I know we kind of like stumbled into more of from the time that you started your business to where you're at now. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like, I know that you've been doing a lot of stuff for the small time industry, but I'm kind of curious as to, like, as you have been trying to grow, like, what are some of the mental roadblocks that you've been facing in trying to get over that hump of growing the business to a larger targeted audience that has a bigger budget so that you can increase your income? What are some of those things that you kind of face, those challenges? And have you overcome them, or maybe some of the techniques that you've tried to apply to overcome some of those roadblocks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like honestly the biggest roadblock is myself sometimes, kind of standing in my own way. But that I think is just going to be a forever journey in some way, shape, or form. But some of the the roadblocks, sometimes it feels like there's just not enough room for everybody. Like there's too many other people doing this, and of course that other person is going to get that contract because they're better than me, and sort of like the self-deprecation that comes with that. But I think it's just like the longer I do it, the more I know that I have what it takes to complete any given project. I was actually talking with my husband about this, and he was like, you're not in a position where you have to question, like, oh, do I even know how to create that installation, that ceremony arch for a wedding? Like, the skills live in me, and it's just a matter of bringing them to the surface and bringing them to life, and having the confidence to move forward and knowing my own self-worth even. Pricing is always such a hard thing to grapple with, especially as like a creative small business owner. You want the job, but they don't have the budget, so you're gonna maybe like give a little bit, and giving a little bit I think is fine, but I actually kind of learned pretty early on that like knowing my self-worth and trying my hardest, trying my darndest to stand by that and know that if I had to let something go, even if it sounded like an amazing opportunity, if it didn't align with where I was at the time, having to let it go and being okay with that and knowing that everything happens for a reason and that it's just creating space for another great thing that's gonna come my way, you know? And also just fostering relationships, like being in the wedding industry. One huge factor that has helped me grow my business is developing really strong relationships with other vendors and sort of like referral basis. They all now know me. They know the caliber of work that I can produce and that I will produce. And so they feel confident in me sharing, my business and my name with their clients, and fostering that community of vendors has been so rewarding and so powerful in seeing growth. I don't think that anyone can do anything totally alone. And that is a really hard reality, because I'm a control freak and I don't really want anyone to help me, but I know that I need help. If I want to see growth, I have to start asking for help. And so, does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, no, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Allison has a great practical question.
Okay.
Allison, let's spotlight you.
Thank you, Valerie. Hi.
Hi.
I was on my nature walks. I'm discovering all these new beautiful Texas wildflowers.
Yeah.
So I was curious as to your tips for extending the life of them once they're picked.
Some wildflowers in particular don't like to be picked. Texas evening primrose will just shrivel right up. That very pale pink, buttercup shape. They grow everywhere. They don't like being picked. So the weedier ones are definitely hardy. And just in general, floral tips for everyone. Cutting flowers or picking flowers, you always want to strip the stem completely. You want all of that water and life to go to the flower, right? So you can leave some of the leaves, but any of the foliage or anything that is sitting below the water line, you want to strip it, because it can lead to bacteria in the water, and it'll just make everything die faster. A clean stem and a sharp angled cut will really actually go a long way. And then changing the water regularly every day or two will totally help prolong the life of a flower.
Maria raised her hand. She's got a question, and I think we'll do one more after Maria.
Hello.
Hi, Maria.
I was inspired by your talk, and I pulled apart some flowers I had here and made a cute little arrangement and put one in my hair.
Awesome.
But kind of on that last question, I'm curious if you are interested in bridging the gap between knowledge of medicinal properties of flowers and other plants and kind of what you put out there on display, and educating people and making them aware that flowers are so much more than good looking.
Right, yeah. That's a really good question, and I honestly haven't ever really thought about it. Kind of to touch on one of those points from the talk, unfortunately, so much of the work gets composted after the fact, and in some way, shape, or form kind of goes back into the earth. So no, I haven't actually dived into anything medicinal, any sort of healing, physical healing properties of plants and flowers. But that's not to say I'm not interested in it. I just haven't found the time. Sorry, does that answer what you're getting at?
Well, it sounds like an opportunity. There might be something in the future there.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't say that I've dipped my toes in that pond yet. I know there's a number of people in Austin that do, though. Kind of have different business models, and their focus is plants and nature, but kind of how you can use them in your everyday life to create salves and medicine and all that kind of stuff. I'm drawing a blank on the name now, but maybe I could do some research and provide that link once it comes to mind.
Okay, if you find something, let us know.
Yeah.
I think the last, I don't see any hands, but there was a question in the chat.
Okay.
That came from Jess. She asked, have you considered marrying the conceptual aspect that you explored in your studio installation with your event arrangements? She thinks it's an interesting and unique way to work with florals, and she hasn't seen it before. So have you thought about doing that for your event arrangements?
Yeah, I have actually. The only difference is that work like this installation, the dried work, is actually much more labor intensive than working with fresh flowers, and the pace at which you have to work on an event. So conceptually, I think that we could kind of get to creating some more unique type of installations and arrangements for, say, a wedding than your typical, like wedding arch or centerpiece or anything like that. But as far as it pertains to like creating something like this for a wedding, we would have to have a lot more time than we normally do. We normally just get access the day of, and we have a couple of hours to put it all up and take it all down. So the fresh flowers are just like actually an easier medium to arrange quickly than something like this that is so dense and create and requires a lot of really meticulous binding and wiring and a scissor lift. That's what I had to use to get that up there. So the logistics would be kind of the only thing. If there was time and ample resources, then I would love to showcase this type of work and honor something like a wedding or a birthday or an event or something like that with more like sculptural art than just kind of your centerpiece on a table. So.
Well, we want to thank Valerie once again. You can clap and thumbs up and.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for sharing and being with us. And we're so happy you're part of the Creative Mornings community now.
I am too. It was my pleasure. Thank you.